65,000 years ago, a group of humans stood on a beach and looked out at the sea. They had no metal, no maps, no writing, no sails. Farming would not be invented for another 50,000 years. The wheel was unimaginably far in the future, and in front of them was open ocean stretching all the way to the horizon. Beyond that horizon, they could see absolutely nothing. No land, no island, no coastline, just water and sky, and they got on a raft and they sailed straight into it anyway. Days later, they arrived in a place no human had ever set foot. We call it Australia. This was the first great ocean crossing in human history, and here is what makes it almost impossible to believe. Scientists have run the numbers, simulated the currents, and modeled the winds, and the chance of drifting there by accident is less than 5%, which means it was not an accident at all. They knew what they were doing. They planned it, they built for it, and they aimed for a land they could not see. So how on earth did they pull it off? To understand how astonishing this is, you have to understand the geography. 65,000 years ago, the world looked very different. Sea levels were far lower because so much water was locked up in ice. Land that is underwater today was dry and walkable. Southeast Asia was one huge landmass, joined all the way down through Indonesia. Scientists call it Sunda. And on the other side, Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania were fused into one giant continent. Scientists call that one Sahel. So here is the crucial part. Even at the lowest sea levels in the deepest ice age, Sunda and Sahel were never connected, not once, not ever. Between them lies a scattered chain of islands called Wallacea, and Wallacea has never been joined by land to either side. The water between those islands is deep, hundreds of meters deep. Even when the oceans dropped, the gaps stayed open, which means there was no land bridge to Australia. There was no walking route. There was no shortcut. There has never been a way to reach Australia on foot. Not for humans, not for any large land animal. This is exactly why Australia's animals are so bizarre and unique, and it means one simple, staggering thing. Every single human who has ever lived in Australia descends from people who crossed the ocean to get there. So how far did they actually have to go? To get from Asia to Australia, you have to island hop through Wallacea. Some of those hops are short, 20 or 30 kilometers, hard but imaginable if you can see the next island from the beach. But at least one of those crossings is different. At least one open water crossing is around 100 kilometers. That is 60 miles of open sea with no land in between, and here is the detail that changes everything. From the shore of the last island, you cannot see Australia. It is below the horizon, it is invisible. The earth curves away and there is nothing there but water. So imagine standing on that beach 65,000 years ago. You are looking at an empty ocean. There is no evidence that anything exists on the other side. And you are about to bet your life and your family's lives on the idea that something does. As one researcher put it, their moon was Australia. This wasn't a fishing trip. This was a leap into the unknown. Now, for a long time, scientists had a comfortable explanation. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe a few people were fishing near the shore and a storm blew them out to sea. Maybe they clung to a log, drifted for days, and washed up in Australia by pure luck. It's a tidy story, and it lets you avoid a very uncomfortable conclusion. So researchers decided to actually test it. They built computer models of the ancient ocean. They reconstructed the currents, the winds, the tides, and the sea levels of that time. Then they simulated thousands and thousands of virtual castaways, people blown off islands, drifting, floating, hoping, and they asked one simple question: how many make it to Australia? The answer was brutal. Drifting there by pure accident is essentially a losing bet. The probability of randomly reaching Sahel stays under 5%, unless you assume dozens of adults are being swept off an island over and over for thousands of years, which is not how the world works. But then the researchers changed one thing in the simulation. They let the virtual travelers choose their departure time and paddle, even slowly, toward a destination. And the odds shot up dramatically. That is the whole answer right there. Random drifting fails. Deliberate travel works. Our ancestors did not stumble into Australia. They aimed at it. And it gets more impressive because of a second problem. If 2 or 3 castaways wash up on a continent, they die. You cannot build a population from a handful of survivors. You need enough people to have children, and enough genetic diversity to keep going. Studies suggest you need hundreds, possibly over 1,000 people, to found a viable population. Now think about what that actually means. This wasn't one raft. This wasn't one heroic accident. This was hundreds of people crossing open ocean again and again, multiple voyages, multiple boats, coordinated over years. That requires planning, cooperation, and shared knowledge. It requires someone to say, there is land out there and we are going to it. And it requires everyone else to believe them enough to get on the raft. This was not a shipwreck. This was the first great maritime migration in human history. And if that just gave you chills, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think. But that raises the biggest question of all. If you cannot see Australia, how do you know it's there? And this is where our ancestors reveal how clever they really were. Because the ocean is not empty. The ocean is full of clues. Clue number 1, smoke. Australia is a dry continent, and it burns. Huge natural bushfires would have sent columns of smoke high into the sky, and smoke can be seen from far, far beyond the horizon. Clue number 2, clouds. Land heats up faster than water, and hot land pushes clouds upward. A large continent creates a distinctive stationary cloud formation above it. Sailors have used this trick for thousands of years. If you see a cloud that never moves, there is land underneath it. Clue number 3, birds. Land birds cannot sleep on water. So if you see birds flying out to sea in the evening and coming back at dawn, you know there is somewhere for them to land. Watch which direction they go and you have a compass. Clue number 4, the water itself. Debris, floating vegetation, changes in the color of the sea, different swell patterns bending around a landmass you cannot yet see. Pacific Islanders would later master this to an astonishing degree. So our ancestors were not sailing blind. They were reading the sky, the birds, the water, and the smoke, and they concluded correctly that there was something out there, which may be one of the earliest scientific deductions in human history. So what were they actually sailing on? And here is the frustrating part. We will probably never know for certain because whatever they built was made of wood, bamboo, and plant fiber, and organic material rots. It leaves nothing behind after 65,000 years. Worse, the beaches they launched from are now deep underwater, sea levels rose, and the entire coastline of that world is gone. But archaeologists have a very strong idea. The best candidate is bamboo. Bamboo grows abundantly across Southeast Asia. It is hollow, incredibly buoyant, light, and strong. It can be cut with stone tools and lashed together with plant fiber. And here is the astonishing part. Researchers estimate that a large bamboo raft could carry 50 to 100 people, and it could stay afloat out at sea almost indefinitely. It would not sink like a hollow boat. It floats because the material itself floats. So picture it. A huge bamboo platform packed with families, food, water, and tools slowly paddled across 60 miles of open ocean. Modern explorers have actually tried to rebuild these rafts and recreate the voyage, and they have shown that it is genuinely possible. Difficult, dangerous, and exhausting, but possible. So let's stand on that beach with them, one final time. The raft is finished, the water is loaded, the children are aboard. You wait for the right season, the right wind, the right current, because you only get one chance at this, and then you push off, and the island behind you begins to shrink. For the first hours, you can still see home, and then at some point, the last hill disappears behind the waves, and now there is nothing. No land behind you, no land ahead of you, water in every direction. This is a moment no human had ever experienced before. For 4 to 7 days, you drift and paddle across open sea. You ration your water. You watch the sky. You do not sleep well. Storms come. The sea rises. Some rafts almost certainly never arrive. And then one morning, someone sees something on the horizon. A smudge, a cloud that doesn't move, a line of dark green, land. They were right, and they step ashore onto a continent that has never seen a human being. A land of giant kangaroos, marsupial lions, and birds taller than a man. They are, in every possible sense, the first. Now here is the fact that I think should be far more famous than it is. Humans reached Australia around 65,000 years ago. Humans permanently settled Europe around 45,000 years ago. Read that again. We crossed the open ocean to a hidden continent 20,000 years before we settled Europe. We had boats before we had Europe. We were sailing the open sea while the ice sheet still covered the north. And on the way, our ancestors did not travel through an empty world. Wallacea was home to other kinds of humans, Denisovans, and on the island of Flores, the tiny species we nicknamed the hobbits. Our ancestors met them, and in some cases had children with them. To this day, Aboriginal Australians and New Guineans carry a few percent of that ancient DNA, a genetic fingerprint of a voyage that happened before recorded history. Their descendants have lived in Australia continuously ever since. That is one of the oldest unbroken cultures on the entire planet. So, how did ancient humans cross the ocean? They did it with bamboo, plant rope, and stone tools. They did it by reading smoke, clouds, birds, and swells. They did it by waiting for the right wind and then trusting each other completely. And above all, they did it on purpose. They looked at an empty horizon, decided there was something behind it, and gambled their entire future on being right. We often imagine ancient humans as frightened, primitive, and small, but this was not the act of frightened people. This was ambition. This was engineering. This was faith in an idea. 65,000 years before rockets, before satellites, before maps, a group of humans on a beach chose to sail off the edge of their known world. Not because they had to, but because they wondered what was out there. That impulse never left us. It is the same impulse that pushed us across every ocean, and eventually pointed us at the stars. The first astronauts weren't wearing spacesuits. They were standing on a beach, on a bamboo raft, looking at an empty sea, and they went anyway. So tell me in the comments, would you have gotten on that raft? And if you want more stories about the ancient humans who made you possible, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.